one of the most important things about public speaking that I've learned over the years that I've been doing this kind of work is at any point in time when you come and speak in front of a crowd like this, you appear, or at least it's important to appear as vulnerable. I think it's a very crucial thing over here because at the end of the day, if I come in to think about how many hours I took to prepare this, or more importantly, how many years I took to prepare this, right? You understand over here that I think I was due for a very important course, right? And I put aside that course over here and I said that this is a platform where I could speak. And a lot of kind of work that we've been doing actually for the past few years itself can be heard. I don't know by who. I don't know what kind of people will be here listening to this over here, but what I'm saying over here is that it's important. It's important to me, it's important to my colleagues, it's important actually to the multiple students that we have actually gone through. And at the end of the day itself, I spent, I think, yesterday and just today, right? I was watching TED again and again. I was thinking over here, what is the ingredient? At the end of the day itself, and all these particular talks in 20 minutes, the kind of amazing things that they can begin to share. I thought 20 minutes was a short time, right? But if you really just sit down there and you listen to Ken Robinson, you listen to what he could achieve in 20 minutes, right? I'm thinking over here, I've got this 20 minutes. So things over here said, I was watching these through things and I was just thinking that if I spend in this 20 minutes, right, the first 10 minutes feeling nervous, right, thinking of myself, I'm going to screw up certain ideas and make sure I don't get this through to you, it would kill you. Right? So I would say over here that before I begin anything, I like to be vulnerable. I like to say that this talk is important to me. It's important itself to, I think, the kind of work that we do. Right? And once I say that, I think it puts me in a place over here where it empowers myself. Because I can draw on all the years that we've gone through over here, and I can tell you over here that what I'm about to share with you is significant. It's significant for the country. It is significant for, I think, the people that you will see in your lives. Okay. So let's go through this. Let's understand something. This is one, I would say, strange man. I feel nervous over here because he's going to watch this on the internet and he's going to know I'm calling him strange. But he's a Brit, I think, or Australian. Every month, I think, School of Thought, or at least the school which I teach in over here, gives a lecture at the National Library. Right. We hold about 4 or 5 sessions where we teach about world affairs, or basically how do you position yourself in Singapore, and how do you learn about the world and trends that are happening over here. And what has happened over here is in each of these lectures, right, we get more and more, not so much students, right, but members of the public getting in, strange little people from governments, right, coming in, right, and they sit down there and they sit and they go, what is it people are talking about? Right, because they hear from actually students and saying over here, you have to attend these talks. You have to go there and actually hear these particular lectures, right? And it became a place over here where we started off as just lecturing about general paper. This is a local paper that students begin to take in junior colleges, right? This paper itself about global affairs, but largely it's about argumentation, right? But what happens over here is that these kids are going out and telling their parents and telling their other teachers, saying, you've got to come to these lectures, right? These people are coming to this lecture, and I've got one strange man. And he told me that his story was that he went bankrupt sometime back during the financial crisis. And he said over here that they came to a place where he didn't have enough money to pay for his employees, so he took out his credit cards, right, and he paid his employee salary through his credit cards. And he thought that he could pull through, but he didn't, right? And he got wiped clean. And said over here that these lectures changed his life. That every single month when he came to listen to these lectures, he began to see something differently. And he began to see basically his work differently. And when he saw that over here, he said that there was one day itself, he was there and he was a bit emotional. He said over here, you changed my life. I couldn't understand itself. How is it possible? Okay, that's almost about a 45-plus-year-old man, intensely successful in terms of his own technology business, right? Listen to these lectures about general paper, right? And he could change his life. And that's something itself that struck me. If you look at this over here, right? The whole idea is that I'm going to share about the idea about social innovation. So when it comes down to actually Singapore, this is perhaps one of the most efficient and I would say powerful countries you have around. We've heard about these stories about how the whole Singapore miracle and things like that itself. But the whole issue over here is that at the end of the day, our people, or the people who live in this country itself, the constant complaint is that we are not innovative group. We are. We're not. We are not an innovative group. At the end of the day itself, when we're looking at, for example, ideas of technology or efficiency or ways for itself to actually review or improve the way that we're doing it over here, we consistently itself look at other countries, we borrow the ideas and we bring it in and we innovate. Right? And when we do this over here, we do it pretty well. Right? We're pretty good copycats. Much like how Taiwan's a pretty good copycat and other countries are pretty good copycats. Right? But things over there, if I really ask, and you would, if you did my kind of work, and you spoke right to the top 20% of this nation, students, right, coming out from junior college education, scholars coming out and asking over here, what would you like to do with your life? They have no freaking idea. They come out, right, and they get the straight A's and they get the scholarships over here and ask them, what do you want to do with your life? I have no idea, right? My mother says, it's a classic. My mother says I should be an accountant or a doctor or a lawyer. Everyone else tells me that I should be something, right? Then they don't know what to do. So what happened over here was that we started a school. We started a school that wanted to move away from this culture. At the end of the day itself, we started a school that was not talking about grades. Right? You will get your grades. Okay? At the end of the day itself, we wanted to talk about life. And we wanted to talk about the world. We wanted to talk about your role in this world. And we want to talk about the fact that you're in a country right now, which is the most globalized country in the world. Right? Your position, your context, right, is probably a very powerful one, but one in which you don't necessarily realize. Right? And we come to a place over here where this school stands for that. It stands for the idea itself that strategically we're in a great place. Right? But if you just open your eyes and you realize that you're here, okay, you can do some pretty amazing things with yourself. So I'm going to come back to this particular slide at the end of this whole talk over here. Okay. At the end of the day, what we're learning about today really is the idea of social innovation, right? Specifically in the context of Singapore. And it's strange for me over here because I think about half the audience are foreigners. But if you're here, right, I would say that this talk's very much for you too, because if you're here, you're probably based in Singapore, working here, right? And there are lots of things itself that you can do for this country, right? Lots of things that you can do for actually your companies and actually the teams that you're working with that I think, I would believe, I value add to your life. Oops. The Thought Collective right now runs about 4 companies. We'll be opening up another restaurant at the end of this particular year. We've got a place over here which is, I think, consistently with new ideas coming in, and we are aiming ourselves to about 6 companies in total. What happens over here is that all these companies are social enterprises. They are primarily businesses that are aiming to be sustainable, but they are set up specifically for the reason of actually meeting a particular social cause. Okay? So at the end of the day itself, I mean, we'll talk about these companies later, but School of Thought actually is the one we're going to start with, because that's our flagship company. When we first started over here, we were interested actually in setting up tuition. And I like to do this over here to just say that, although I am the one actually here speaking, we couldn't have done this without people with the same vision. There are 3 or 4 directors together that we set up companies, and over the past 6 years itself, most of these companies have become extremely sustainable. They have done well among themselves, but they are causing ripples on the social landscape in this country. If you take a look at this, and I'm going to start primarily with the idea itself of how this began. And most good things itself don't really begin upon the level where we're looking at, say, big companies or big visions. Right? This came or started over here about us being alone. I came to a place over here where I grew up in a very strange environment. My grandpa he was a very successful businessman. In 1970s over here, he was as rich as Hong Leong or Far East was, right? And he built some of the first 2 skyscrapers in Singapore, right? And came to this place over here where, because of his wealth, I came back from actually a primary school education in London. Right? When we came back over here, what happened was that every Chinese New Year, right, my grandpa himself would bring us to Goh Chok Tong's house, to the minister's house, and over here we'll get our red packets from these particular ministers. And it was a strange environment to grow up in, right? Really, really strange. But when I came back, so I didn't understand the significance of doing something like that. Okay, but as we each began to do this, I remember coming to a place over here where my sister, right, she, according to actually Singapore, was considered this the A student. Right, she was from Raffles Girls Primary, then she went to actually RGS, then she went to RJC, then she went to Cambridge. Right, she was a PSC scholar. She came out herself and she was a first class honours, right, from Cambridge, one of the tops over here. Right, after the O-level results, right, I promised Mom, I said over here, I'm going to get 6 points. 6 points over here, meaning over here that those of you who don't understand the system here, the lower the points, the better. Right? 6 is probably the lowest you can probably get. Right? I declared my marks out 6 points. Results came out, I got 32. Right. And I was just thinking, well, shit. Okay, so, yes, you know, it came out to be 32, right? And I got 32 points. And in 32 points, it's a dangerous place in Singapore over here because I got enough points, okay, to graduate, but not enough points to move on to the next stage, right? And that stuck me itself in this no man's land. That back in basically the early 1990s, right? There was no place for people like me. If you either suck and you retain, you stay in the system. But if you move on, you better do well enough to move on. Because if not, you're going to fall through the cracks. And I was one of those people that fell through the cracks. And every Chinese New Year, what happened over here was that, you know, I would go with my sister and we'd go visit the Prime Minister. And imagine this, okay, my dad says, hi, this is my daughter. She's from Cambridge, right, first class honours, and this is my son, he is tall. Right? And we're consistently with this whole narrative, you know, this is my son, this is tall, right? Oh, you're tall, I'm tall too, right? And me and Coach Tong would always weigh, you know, our heights over here, but at the end of the day itself, that was it. Right? I was tall. And I grew up in this place over here where I'd honestly stay. That year of retaking my exams, right, I was alone. It was a sad thing over here, because at the end of the day, one of my best friends was the radio. Right? I remember myself at the age of 17, right, I would listen to the radio or fantasize about, okay, how the radio is talking to me. That they played this particular song, I was thinking, oh my God, you know, I'm so grateful that these DJs itself are thinking of my situation. Right? And think about how self-absorbed that is. You sit down there yourself, you're listening to these radios. Right? I'm doing this, at the end of the day, when the results finally released, I retook my entire thing at 17. I slipped into junior college. When I finally came out from A-levels, I got C, C, D. Right? But like A1 itself in this strange subject called general paper, right? And what happened over here is that I came out and I got slipped into university, right? I graduated finally after about 4 years or so, not so much with honors. I didn't get a single A in my life, right? I took philosophy and I got an FF. Right? So I thought philosophy was damn funky, right? So yeah, it's an interesting thing, right? And I never really did well in school. But at the end of the day, if you really hear about this kind of stories, you would say that, okay, according to the Singapore story, this guy can't make it. He really can't make it. When I became a teacher, I experienced my first student who went through the same situation. She came to a place of where she fell through the cracks. Did well enough to actually finish her certification, not well enough to begin to move on. Right? When I became a teacher, I saw how many there were. There were hundreds. Right? Hundreds of them who fell through the cracks and couldn't begin to move forward. And you could see itself, right? They were alone. They were really alone. They came to a place over here where they're valued as people, and it didn't matter how smart they were. And I thought this girl itself, I taught this one girl, she's a genius in terms of maths, right? Really, really good. At the end of the day itself, right, she couldn't pass the English for the life of her. Right? She took her exams 4 times, right? And you could hear the despair. The 3rd time, so she got the result, and it was still a failing grade, right? The wail that came out of this girl, I've never heard that kind of sound emit from a human being before, right? And we're going to create some situations over here where the 4th time when she finally passed, right, and we ever clear this, right, she began to gain a somehow strange dignity that I've never ever seen before, right. And things over here, the School of Thought was interested when it first started off, right, in dealing with the Chinese people who fell through the cracks, right. And we began to focus group hundreds of students talking about basically, okay, what is it that you want in life? What is it that you want in grades? What is it that you want in your studies? Right? And we began to focus group, then we designed a system over here where they could learn not so much about how to do well in grades, but how to do well in life. And we realized over here that when we extended the scope far, right, when they learned about how to do well in life, they naturally did well in grades. Right? And these people came to a place over here where their grades did not expire. We know this. We know this that when we graduate from grades, right, when we graduate from our subjects, our subjects will expire. Right? Who the hell still remembers what you did in school? Right? They will expire. Right? And things over here, we tried to actually give them skill bases, but they wouldn't expire. So it came to a place over here where we began to realize, right, that Singapore actually was one of these countries that, because it was meritocratic, and because it was systematic, and because of how efficient it had to run, we were largely running around ideas of labels, right? Labels of, do you have this particular cert? Where is it you live? Right? And I noticed this when I was growing up. I grew up the idea of saying, okay, where is it you live? I said, oh, Bukit Timah. They go, Bukit Timah. Right? Then I saw friends, right? And they would say, where is it you live? Oh, I live in Khatib. Oh, Khatib. Yeah. Oh, Bukit Timah. Oh. Raffles Junior College. Wow. Oh, Yishun. And it came out over here, and you could hear this body language. You could see it. You could see it, right? And clearly itself, everyone had these particular labels. And each of these labels over here, what began to strike us, okay? It's all about share with you. This is a core principle in terms of how we actually begin to run lessons, right? I'm going to share this concept with you in a very simple way. I need a volunteer. I'll ask you to help me with this. And Elias doesn't know he's doing this. I'm going to push this chair up front. I'm going to put Elias itself in a very precarious position. Okay, I'm going to illustrate for you what we mean by function plus context equals value. Okay, Elias, help me with this. I'm going to stand up on this chair. Stand around. Don't use me to support. No, hold this guy. This hold this guy. Okay, now, he's going to demonstrate this. I'm going to hold the cup just a bit lower. Just here. Just here. Okay, good. Let's take a look at this. This is a pair of scissors. Okay. At the end of the day itself, right, this pair of scissors, by function, will always do the same thing. It cuts things off, right? So, did I say off? So what happens over here? It's okay. Okay, so what happens over here is that this pair of scissors cuts things. Okay. Now I'm going to do something. I'm going to put this pair of scissors, okay, here. How's it you feel now? Threatened. Yeah, sure. Okay, so the feeling over here is coming out over here is threatened. Notice, okay, the emotion is a negative emotion. Okay, the pair of scissors at the end of the day itself, right, always has the same function. Okay, this function does not change. The things over here, I could put this here. I'm suggesting to you that if I change the context, okay, that feeling that he's having over here doesn't necessarily have to be threatened. It could be honored. Okay, if we were moving back itself in Imperial China, and this man was about to serve the emperor, okay, this man would be honored. Okay. He might feel a bit nervous, yes, but ultimately itself, right, his whole idea itself is that the value of what is being created over here is that he would feel honored there. He could be 3 years old, right? Muslim boy coming to a place over here which is going through circumcision. At the end of the day itself, right, that particular feeling, right, the feeling you had over here is necessary, right? Not necessarily threatened or nervous or I'm going to die, right? So things over here is that you really think through this. Thank you. Is that the functions of things technically don't change. At any point in time, if you're looking at this, sometimes it comes to a place over here where we look at people, okay, and we say over here, look at this person. This person sucks. This person sucks. The person doesn't suck because of who the person is. The person sucks because of the context they've been put in. At the end of the day itself, right, you can look at almost anything that you want. But sometimes itself in certain lives, right, you begin to believe that I have no real value. I come to a place over here where I feel down, right? But whether you're feeling down or up has got nothing to do with you. It's got to do with your context, right? If we look at science and tech, we look at media, we look at anything you have over here as a tool, right? If I say technology comes to this place over here where it's powerful, it is powerful in a certain context. We have particular phrases like, for example, this technology is way ahead of its time. Notice that phrase. The technology is ahead of its time. That if we were saying over here that this technology were, in that context, 30 years ahead of time, its value would be great. But unfortunately, it's ahead of its time. At the end of the day itself, right, we want to understand this as a formula. Anything that's of value, when we begin to ascertain value of things, whether or not prejudice exists, why we argue as people. Okay, I would suggest to you that in terms of all the work that we've been doing over here, we realize it comes down to context. Usually what happens over here is that we very rarely come to a place where we actually fight over function. So, we would say, for example, and let's look at a typical counseling case that I would deal with on a day-to-day basis. A particular girl would come over here and she'll say that, I'm useless. I can't come to a place over here where I'm finding value in my particular life. So what she would do over here is that she would say that no one understands my position, right? And that context she has over here, so she defined it really, really small. So what happens is that we can come to a place where we say, no, okay, your context may not be about what you think it is. Okay, what is it you're experiencing? She's over here experiencing dejection or fear, right? And then she meets another person who's much, much more successful than her, right? But also begins to experience dejection and fear, right? And usually what happens over here is that two people from so-called separate contexts, right, a top school or bottom school, can't begin to meet or talk or help each other. But as long as we begin to redefine the context, say over here that what you believe yourself to be isolated or alone is really not that. Things over here, the context you're operating from is a context of fear, not a context of I have just failed my O-levels. The context you're operating from is fear. And we began to show her this over here. She said, okay, right now she's in this context. Her idea itself is that if I can begin to shift my context, move it up, right, suddenly her value shoots. We've been seeing this in counseling and mentoring in terms of all these grades you have over here in terms of subjects, right? And students have learned to actually analyze situations very fast. They can help their kids, their friends fast. They can begin to jump in terms of their grades because they realize in all, notice the word, evaluation. In all evaluation of things, right? They began to actually look at any situation and say, let's evaluate Singapore, right? Singapore is of value or no value because of today's context. Right? Before Singapore ever hit a globalized world, before we ever became globalized, Singapore as a country itself was practically, I mean, we understood this. 1965, we felt ourselves that we were going to be screwed. Right? Suddenly itself in 2009, we have all this technology and all this kind of globalization you're looking at. Singapore itself is finding itself in a very interesting position. Suddenly it's of value. Right? So, we came to the place over here where, in this, okay, we began to discover platforms by which, if we could begin to align your context. Okay, so what we're doing with students, okay, we take a context, we align it with another person. And we keep aligning it and saying over here that there are much larger contexts you can operate from. Okay, we can begin to start what we call social innovation. That you begin to operate in the place itself, so in terms of society, in a much larger place itself than you would normally begin to do. Right? And they began to actually see, right, a lot of purpose in their life. Right? Direction is what to begin to do. Okay? I'm going to show you itself in terms of these 4 businesses, primarily the kind of work that we do. Right? How do we change their contexts? Tuition was not for their grades. At the end of the day itself, right, we understood or helped them understand over here that whatever it is they are studying in their grades will expire. Okay? And if they ever begin to learn some things about tuition, right, they have to learn about it for the world. Okay? But who's going to pay for that? If I'm saying over here that I'm going to come over here and set up a program for you where you're going to learn about the world and you're going to learn about Singapore and how to be a better citizen, how to be a better global citizen, right? No kid will pay for that. No kid will come to a place over here and pay, right, 2 hours and spend 2 hours an entire week, right? Give this particular fee, right, and say over here, I want to become a better global citizen. Who the hell does that? Right? But they will dedicate time and resources itself to actually improve their grades. Okay, so what we do over here is that we said, okay, let's synergize both. Let's find a way itself for them to get grades, at the same time itself, but become global citizens. Right? And they come in, they sit through a program for 4 months or so, right? And their grades suddenly shoot, and then they realize they're not really studying about the grades, they're studying about the world. Right? And things over here, we began to build a sustainable business, right, to turn a lot of normally apathetic youth in Singapore to suddenly become very empowered, responsible people, right? Begin to move towards a greater social cause. Time and Newsweek has been operating in Singapore for a very, very long time. Okay? And our students over here were subscribing this. And when they subscribed it over here, I think some of the Singaporeans, I remember this time, but they subscribe Time and Newsweek, and it sits down there at your desk. Right? And every week it comes in over here, and it begins to pile up right to this big red pillar of guilt. And you think, my God, right, I really should be reading this. I really should be more updated with current affairs. Right? And the day itself, right, it just picks up over there. At the end of the day itself, when someone asks you, right, do you begin to actually read Time? Yeah, I read Time. Read Time. Right? This big pillar of guilt that sits in the corner. Right? And you realize over here at the end of the day that these kids are not picking up because there was no real relevance with what they're doing. We redesigned our entire current affairs magazine and said over here that how do I begin to align, right, what Time is doing into current affairs with your particular grades, right? And we changed the context of the magazine. Right? Came to a place over here where right now we're at a distribution of 20,000. Out of 18 junior colleges in Singapore itself, right, 11 of them made it compulsory. Okay, they're looking at this itself as a magazine which they are addicted to, they're picking up, they're reading. Okay. We began to look at national heritage in Singapore. There were no roots. Singaporeans didn't really feel rooted to the country itself and didn't feel that they could begin to have a clear identity. So we began to actually have national education trails where, not so much the idea itself that go to Chinatown, Little India all over again, but they would look at their own regions, Tampines and Bedok and Tanjong Pagar, and to collect the stories from the areas around over here, and they built a little heritage package where these kids right together with us will build their heritage and they will create a legacy for themselves and they pass it on right to the next batch. The next batch will actually visit these picture trails and keep building upon it. What I was amazed by over here is I was seeing a secondary 4 student right, interviewing multiple people within the block, right, all these like old ladies and old aunties over here, collecting their stories and putting together in terms of the trails package, right. And we're seeing over here that they took responsibility for the heritage. Right, this way. This is actually ThinkScape. Last one, you see over here is this idea of our cafe or restaurant, that we began to actually set up a restaurant base where we said that, okay, if we're doing all this work for students, can we do it for the community, right? And we're thinking over here, how can we begin to align ourselves with the general public? So ventured into the F&B business, and we had no freaking idea what we were doing, right? We didn't understand how much it would cost, or basically whether it was difficult or not over here, but we just did it because we believed, right, in that vision. When we set up the cafe itself, it began to take off, right? It was called Food for Thought. We'll be opening actually a new restaurant right next door to Singapore Art Museum. Okay, but national agencies were interested in actually working together with us. Right, saying over here that if you can do this work with your kids, we want you to do it for the overall community. Right, and we got this really great rates to begin at this particular space. So at this, School of Thought comes to this place where the bottom line is, if you do begin to actually run through all the businesses that we have, we're largely saying over here that you are part of a much larger context. Think about it. The whole place over here, about 10, right? That we're sitting down here itself is with people as diverse as we are, right? What we're trying to do over here is we're trying to open up a larger context for ourselves. We're trying to see over here, okay, I have a context and you have a context, right? And the day itself, right, can we share this? Can we come to a place where we can find synergy between what we're doing, right? If we can operate that way, it's a very empowering idea. If we operate into a place that's much larger than ourselves. Community just doesn't exist. It has to be built. Singapore comes to a place where our communities are not that strong. Okay, we're a young nation, but it can be more powerful. It can come to a place over here where the expatriates, plus the local community, plus basically whatever age groups you're looking at over here, build a really amazing society. Right? I've seen it in my own work. I've seen it being done, but it requires us to actually begin build it. Right? And I'm saying over here that whatever skill base you have, okay, I'll be fascinated itself to actually hear whatever it is that you guys are doing in your own work base. Okay, so I can learn more. Okay, but I'll say over here that as individuals, right, we begin to do more of this kind of work. Right? When we meet, when we talk, we can have one hell of a community here. Right? One hell of a community. Okay, and I really wish you the best in terms of the kind of work that you guys will be doing. Okay, I look forward to meeting you later. Thank you.